What would you do if your roommate created debt under your name, turning your entire life upside down? I'm Alex, 25 years old, and I got royally screwed by someone I trusted, a girl named Rachel who turned my Seattle life into a living nightmare. After that brutal situation with my vindictive older sister last time, I thought I'd learned my lesson about trusting people, but apparently I'm a slow learner. This time, I decided to turn our shared apartment into a viral horror story that would teach her and the internet a lesson about betrayal. This is my revenge story, a masterclass in what happens when trust goes catastrophically wrong. You know that feeling when you think you found the perfect living situation? When you're splitting rent in one of Seattle's most expensive markets and everything seems too good to be true? Well, spoiler alert, it usually is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you how a simple roommate arrangement became my most elaborate revenge plot yet. Let me paint you a picture of how this whole mess started. Rachel and I met through one of those roommate finding apps. You know, the ones where everyone pretends to be the perfect housemate who definitely won't leave dirty dishes in the sink or steal your leftovers. The apartment we found was this gorgeous 2-bedroom in Capitol Hill, one of those trendy Seattle neighborhoods where you pay $3,000 a month for the privilege of hearing your neighbor's indie band practice at 2 a.m. At first, Rachel seemed like a dream roommate. She was 24, worked in marketing for some tech startup, and had this infectious laugh that made even Netflix binges feel like adventures. We'd spend hours on our secondhand IKEA couch, sharing popcorn and dissecting whatever true crime documentary was trending. She'd make these elaborate smoothie bowls on Sunday mornings, and I'd reciprocate with my grandmother's pancake recipe. We even had matching coffee mugs. Hers said powered by caffeine, mine said fueled by dreams. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags earlier, like how she always seemed to have cash flow issues right before rent was due, or how she'd mysteriously disappear whenever utility bills arrived. But I was caught up in the fantasy of having found my platonic soulmate, someone who understood my freelance advertising schedule and didn't judge me for eating cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row. The first sign something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday in March. And if you know Seattle, that's saying something because it's always raining here. I was checking my credit score and Credit Karma, just routine financial masochism that all millennials engage in, when I saw something that made my stomach drop to my Converse-clad feet. My credit score had plummeted by 150 points. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe some identity theft situation, right? I called the credit bureau, spent 45 minutes on hold, listening to that tinny jazz music that makes you question your will to live, only to discover that there were multiple accounts opened under my name. Electric bills, internet services, even a freaking credit card with a $3,000 limit that was maxed out. All tied to our apartment address, all opened within the past 4 months. The customer service representative, bless her patient heart, walked me through each account. The electric bill for our unit opened under my social security number, but I'd never set it up. The high-speed internet package, again, my information, but Rachel had been the one handling all the utility setups. Even a subscription to some premium cable package that I definitely hadn't ordered because, hello, Netflix generation here. My hands were literally shaking as I hung up the phone. The rain outside seemed to mock me, drumming against our windows like a countdown to financial ruin. I sat there in our living room, surrounded by all the cozy touches we'd added together, the fairy lights Rachel had strung around the windows, succulent garden I'd started on the kitchen windowsill, and felt like I was seeing our shared space for the first time. When Rachel got home that evening, I confronted her with printouts of all the accounts. I remember her standing in our doorway, dripping from the Seattle rain, looking so young and innocent in her oversized cardigan. For a moment, I hoped there was some reasonable explanation. "Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk about the utility bills." The way her face changed, it was like watching a mask slip. The wide-eyed innocence melted into something calculating, defensive. She dropped her vintage leather purse by the door and crossed her arms. "What about them?" she asked, but her voice had this edge I'd never heard before. I spread the papers across our coffee table like evidence in a crime scene. These are all under my name, but I never signed up for any of them. My credit score is destroyed, Rachel. Destroyed. She barely glanced at the papers before shrugging, actually shrugging, like my financial ruin was no big deal. Look, Alex, you're being dramatic. I just put your name on some stuff because my credit isn't great right now. It's not like it matters. Not like it matters. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been freelancing for 3 years, carefully building my credit score, dreaming of maybe buying a tiny condo someday, and she thought it didn't matter? Rachel, this is fraud. You used my social security number without permission. You've destroyed my credit score. That's when she laughed, this bitter, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. God, Alex, you're so uptight. It's just credit. You can fix it. Besides, you make decent money with all those advertising gigs. You can afford to help me out. Help me out, as if ruining my financial future was some kind of favor I owed her. The argument escalated from there. She accused me of being selfish, of not understanding how hard it was for her to get approved for anything with her credit history. I pointed out that identity theft is, illegal. She rolled her eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I should be grateful she was handling all the boring adult stuff for us. By the time she stormed off to her room, slamming the door hard enough to make our framed art rattle, I was sitting alone in our living room with a pile of evidence and a burning rage in my chest that felt like swallowing molten lava. That night, as I lay in my bed listening to Rachel FaceTime with someone, probably laughing about her uptight roommate, I realized something. The cozy apartment we'd built together, the shared Netflix password, the inside jokes about our neighbors, the comfortable domesticity I'd treasured, it had all been built on lies. And lies, as I'd learned from my previous revenge adventurers, needed consequences. I started planning that very night. If Rachel wanted to destroy my life with technology, I'd use technology to expose her. And if she thought she could dismiss my anger as being dramatic, well, she was about to discover just how dramatic I could get. The first thing you need to know about revenge is that documentation is everything. I'd learned this from my previous encounters with workplace bullies and social media trolls. You can't just go in guns blazing. You need evidence, strategy, and the perfect platform for maximum impact. I spent the next week in full detective mode, and let me tell you, living with your target while gathering evidence is like playing emotional 4D chess while someone's actively trying to ruin your life. Every morning, I'd wake up to Rachel making her elaborate smoothie bowls, humming like she didn't have a care in the world, while I was secretly photographing every piece of mail that came to our apartment. The evidence was damning. Bills kept arriving under my name. The electric company, the cable provider, even a freaking gym membership to some boutique fitness studio in Bellevue that Rachel had been posting Instagram stories from. Each envelope felt like another nail in the coffin of our friendship, but also another piece of ammunition for what I was planning. The breakthrough came when I discovered Rachel had been particularly sloppy with her email. She'd left her laptop open one afternoon while she was in the shower, and I noticed several confirmation emails visible in her Gmail preview. My name, my social security number, my information, all tied to accounts I'd never authorized. I quickly took photos with my phone, my hand shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and fury. There it was, in black and white. Rachel Thompson had systematically used my identity to open at least 7 different accounts over the past 4 months. The paper trail was extensive enough to send her to prison for identity theft. But prison seemed too easy, too quick, too private. That's when I remembered something from my advertising background, the power of viral storytelling. What if I could turn our apartment, this space where she'd betrayed me, into content that would expose her while entertaining thousands of people? The plan crystallized over a weekend while Rachel was visiting her parents in Spokane. I had our apartment to myself, and I used every minute to craft what I privately called the Roommate Horror Story Project. First, I gathered all the physical evidence, every fraudulent bill, every piece of mail with my name attached to accounts I'd never opened. I arranged them chronologically, photographed them with timestamps, and created a digital trail that would be impossible to dispute. Then came the fun part, turning our shared living space into a stage for my revenge. I downloaded several apps that I'd researched specifically for this purpose. One created subtle lighting effects that could make any room look mysteriously haunted. Another generated authentic-sounding, unexplained audio, creaking floorboards, distant whispers, the kind of ambiguous sounds that make you question whether you're alone. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. I would create a series of TikTok videos documenting strange occurrences in our apartment, building an audience that would be emotionally invested in the story. Then, when I had maximum viewership, I'd revealed the real horror story, how my trusted roommate had been systematically destroying my financial life while pretending to be my best friend. I spent hours that weekend setting up shots around our apartment. The living room, where we'd shared so many Netflix nights, became a backdrop for mysterious shadows. The kitchen, where Rachel made her Instagram-worthy smoothie bowls, transformed into a setting for unexplained phenomena. Even our bathroom, with its trendy subway tiles, became a location for capturing unexplained condensation patterns on the mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the very space where she'd betrayed me to create the platform for her exposure. Sunday night, as I heard Rachel's key in the door, I was ready. My phone was loaded with apps, my evidence was organized, and my TikTok account, created under the handle @SeattleRoommateMysteries, was prepared for launch. "Hey, Alex," Rachel called out, her voice cheerful as she dropped her weekend bag by the door. "Miss me?" I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been putting finishing touches on my first video script, and smiled. "Oh, you have no idea how much I missed you, Rachel. This weekend was really enlightening." She didn't catch the edge in my voice, too busy unpacking gifts from her mom, homemade cookies that we'd probably never get to share, given what was about to unfold. "I brought back some of those chocolate chip cookies you love," she said, setting a container on our kitchen counter. "Mom made extra just for you." The cookies looked delicious. They also looked like the last innocent moment we'd ever share as roommates. "That's so sweet of her," I replied, already thinking about how this domestic scene would contrast beautifully with the chaos I was about to unleash. "Rachel, we should definitely enjoy them tonight. Tomorrow might be different." The first video went live at 11:47 p.m. on a Monday night. I'd timed it perfectly, late enough that insomniacs would catch it, early enough in the week that it could build momentum through the viral content cycle. The video was masterful, if I do say so myself. It opened with me sitting in our dimly lit living room, the camera catching just enough of the space to establish the intimate apartment setting. I'd used one of my lighting apps to create subtle shadow movements in the background, nothing obvious, just enough to make viewers feel like something was slightly off. "I need to tell you guys about what's been happening in my apartment," I whispered to the camera, my voice perfectly calibrated to sound concerned but not hysterical. "I've been living with my roommate for about 6 months, and lately things have been weird." I went on to describe strange sounds at night, items moving when I wasn't looking, a general feeling of being watched. The lighting effects app created these perfect moments where shadows seemed to shift behind me, just subtle enough to make viewers rewind to check if they'd really seen something. The comments started rolling in within hours. TikTok's algorithm, bless its mysterious heart, had picked up the video and started pushing it to users who engaged with horror content, roommate stories, and mystery videos. OMG, girl, get out of there. This is giving me chills. Please post more. Have you talked to your roommate about this? That shadow at 034 is not normal. By Tuesday afternoon, the video had 50,000 views. By Wednesday morning, it was approaching 200,000. I was watching the metrics during my coffee break between client calls, refreshing the app obsessively as the numbers climbed. But the real satisfaction came from watching Rachel's reaction. She discovered the video Wednesday evening while we were both in the living room, the same space where I had filmed it. She was scrolling through TikTok on her phone while I pretended to work on my laptop, and I saw exactly the moment she found my content. Her face went through this incredible transformation. First confusion, then recognition of our apartment, then horror as she realized what was happening. Alex, what the fuck is this? She held up her phone, my video playing on loop. In the background of the clip, you could clearly see our distinctive, succulent arrangement, the fairy lights she had hung herself, even the edge of that stupid motivational poster she'd bought that said, "Good vibes only." I looked over innocently, as if seeing it for the first time. Oh wow, that's our apartment. Someone must be having the same weird experiences we've been having. How crazy is that? Alex, this is your TikTok account. This is you talking. The jig was up, but I wasn't ready to reveal the full plan yet. I needed her panicked, off balance, making mistakes. Look, Rachel, I've been experiencing some really strange stuff lately, and I thought documenting it might help me figure out what's going on. I didn't expect it to blow up like this. She was already on damage control mode, scrolling through the hundreds of comments. People are asking for our address. They want to come investigate. Alex, you need to delete this right now. But it was too late. The video had been shared across platforms, reposted to Instagram and Twitter, even picked up by some of those creepy content compilation channels. The story had taken on a life of its own. I can't just delete it, Rachel. Look at how many people are invested in this story now. They're asking for updates. That's when she made her first crucial mistake. Instead of coming clean about the financial fraud, instead of apologizing and offering to fix the damage she had caused, Rachel decided to go on the offensive. Over the next few days, she started her own social media campaign. She began posting Instagram stories about how I was unstable, how living with me had become impossible, how I was obsessed with social media attention. She tagged mutual friends, trying to paint me as the crazy roommate who was making up ghost stories for internet fame. But here's the thing about social media warfare. Once you've got an audience invested in your story, they become protective of you. My followers were already emotionally attached to the mystery of our haunted apartment. When Rachel started posting her counter-narrative, trying to discredit me, it just looked like gaslighting. The comments on her posts were brutal. Sounds like someone doesn't want the truth to come out. Why are you so desperate to shut down your roommate's story? This girl is giving major villain energy. Something about this doesn't add up. By Friday, my follower count had exploded to 100K, and hashtag Seattle Roommate Mysteries was trending in the Pacific Northwest. Local paranormal investigation groups were reaching out, asking if they could visit our apartment. A podcast about unexplained phenomena wanted to interview me. Rachel was spiraling. She had gone from smoothie bowl posting marketing professional to full-blown panic mode in less than a week. She was staying late at work, avoiding our shared spaces, and when she was home, she spent most of her time on frantic phone calls with friends, trying to strategize how to deal with Alex's social media situation. But I wasn't done. The viral ghost story was just the opening act. The real performance was yet to come. By the second week of my viral campaign, I had over 200K followers, hanging on every update from the haunted apartment. But Rachel had been doing her homework too, and she'd figured out more than I'd anticipated. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening. I was in my bedroom editing my latest video, one that would subtly introduce the concept that the supernatural disturbances might be connected to betrayal and deception, when I heard Rachel's key in the front door. But something was different. Instead of her usual tired shuffle after work, her footsteps were sharp, deliberate, angry. "Alex," she shouted from the living room, "get out here, now." I found her standing in the middle of our shared space, holding her laptop open like a weapon. On the screen was a deep dive into my TikTok analytics, follower growth patterns, engagement rates, even a breakdown of my video editing techniques. "You think you're so fucking clever," she hissed, her face flushed with rage. "I know what you're doing. This whole ghost story bullshit, it's all fake. You're using special effects apps, you're manipulating lighting, you're creating this entire fiction to destroy my life." I had to admire her detective work. She'd clearly spent hours researching my content, probably even hired someone to analyze my videos. But she'd made one crucial error. She was focusing on the wrong deception. "Rachel, I have no idea what you're talking about," I said calmly, walking to our kitchen and pouring myself a glass of water. "People are experiencing something genuine in this apartment. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real." "Cut the bullshit," she screamed, slamming her laptop shut. "I found the apps on your phone. I know about the lighting effects, the sound manipulation. I even found the fucking camera angles you've been using. You've been staging all of this." She was absolutely right, of course, but she was walking directly into my trap. "You went through my phone?" I asked, letting genuine shock color my voice. "Rachel, that's a massive violation of privacy. Why would you do something like that?" "Because you're trying to ruin my life. These videos are affecting my job, my relationships, my reputation. People think I'm living with some crazy person who's having paranormal experiences, and now they're starting to think I'm lying when I try to explain what's really happening." The irony was delicious. Rachel was upset about people thinking she was a liar when she had been systematically lying to me for months about stealing my identity. "I never mentioned you in any of my videos," I pointed out. "If people are making assumptions about you, that's not really my fault." That's when she pulled out her nuclear option. "I'm going to expose you," she declared, opening her laptop again and showing me a draft Instagram post. "I've got screenshots of all the apps you've been using, analysis of your video editing techniques, even timestamps showing when you set up shots around the apartment. I'm going to post all of it and prove that you're a fake." I looked at her draft post, which was actually quite thorough. She documented my deception with the kind of detail that would make a forensic investigator proud. But she'd made one critical error. She thought the ghost story was the real game. "Rachel," I said softly, walking back to the living room and sitting down on our couch. "Before you post that, there's something I need to show you." I opened my own laptop and pulled up a folder I'd labeled "The Real Evidence." Her eyes widened as she saw the contents. Dozens of photos showing bills, credit applications, account confirmations, all bearing my personal information, all tied to accounts she'd opened without my knowledge. "What is that?" she whispered, but her face had gone pale. She knew exactly what it was. "This is documentation of identity theft," I said calmly, scrolling through the images. "Someone has been systematically using my social security number, my name, and my credit history to open accounts I never authorized. Isn't that weird? The same kind of weird that's been happening in our apartment." I watched her face crumble as she realized the trap she'd walked into. All her research into my TikTok deception had missed the real story. I had concrete evidence of her financial fraud, documented over months, and I'd been building an audience of hundreds of thousands of people who were emotionally invested in my story. "Alex, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted, standing up and walking to our kitchen counter where I'd arranged some of the physical evidence: bills, statements, account confirmations. Or maybe you can explain the electric bill that's been under my name since we moved in here, even though you told me you were handling all the utility setups. Or the cable package I never ordered, or the gym membership, or the 3 different streaming services. Rachel sank onto our couch, the same couch where we'd shared so many Netflix binges, where I'd trusted her with my problems, where she'd listened to me stress about my freelance income while secretly using my identity to solve her own financial problems. Alex, my credit is destroyed. I couldn't get approved for anything. I was going to pay you back. With what money, Rachel? You maxed out the credit card. You're behind on all these accounts. My credit score has dropped 150 points because of you. That's when I saw something shift in her eyes. The panic was being replaced by calculation, by that same defensive anger she'd shown when I first confronted her. You can't prove I meant to hurt you, she said, her voice gaining strength. And even if you can, posting about it on social media is harassment. I could sue you for defamation. I smiled then, the kind of smile that probably looked predatory. Rachel, I haven't posted anything about financial fraud. All I've done is document some strange experiences in our apartment. If you're worried about me connecting those experiences to, other discoveries, well, that sounds like guilty conscience talking. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to calculate her next move. Finally, she stood up, grabbed her laptop, and headed toward her bedroom. "This isn't over, Alex," she called back over her shoulder. "Two can play at social media games." I waited until I heard her bedroom door slam before opening my laptop and beginning work on what would become my most viewed video yet, Roommate Mystery Update, when the real horror is human. Just when I thought I had all the ammunition I needed, Rachel handed me the nuclear option on a silver platter. It was Saturday morning, 2 days after our confrontation. Rachel had been avoiding me completely, leaving early for work and coming home late. But that morning, she was in such a hurry to leave, probably to meet with whatever lawyer or crisis management person she'd consulted, that she made a crucial mistake. She left her bedroom door open, her laptop charging on the unmade bed, and a stack of papers scattered on her desk. I wasn't planning to snoop, honestly. I was just walking past her room on my way to the bathroom when something caught my eye. An official-looking document with my name prominently displayed at the top. My hands were shaking as I stepped into her room, the space where she'd been plotting against me, where she'd made those frantic phone calls trying to figure out how to deal with me. The document was a loan application from a predatory lending company, the kind that charges 30% interest and preys on people with bad credit. The loan was for $8,000. It was approved, and it was entirely under my name and social security number. But that wasn't the worst part. I photographed the document, my heart hammering against my ribs, then noticed something else. A bank statement from Rachel's personal account showing a deposit of $8,000 dated just 3 weeks ago, right around the time she'd started posting Instagram stories about her incredible weekend in Portland and treating myself to some much-needed retail therapy. She hadn't just stolen my identity for utilities and credit cards. She'd taken out a high-interest loan under my name and used the money to fund a lifestyle upgrade while I was struggling to understand why my credit score had imploded. I took photos of everything, the loan documents, the bank statements, even a handwritten note in her distinctive scrawl that said Alex SSN followed by my actual social security number. She'd been so confident in her deception that she hadn't even tried to hide the evidence. But wait, it gets worse. As I was photographing the loan paperwork, I noticed something else in the pile. A rental application for a 1-bedroom apartment in Belltown, one of Seattle's most expensive neighborhoods. The application was under Rachel's name, but the income verification documents attached to it were fabricated. They claimed she made $85,000 per year, nearly double her actual salary. And where had she planned to get the money for the first month's rent and deposit on this luxury apartment? The $8,000 loan she'd taken out under my name. She wasn't just stealing my identity to pay bills. She was planning to upgrade her entire life on my dime while I was struggling to understand why my credit score had imploded. I sat on her unmade bed, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so systematic and calculated that it took my breath away. This wasn't a desperate roommate making bad decisions in a moment of financial panic. This was premeditated fraud, planned and executed over months, while she smiled at me over breakfast and borrowed my Netflix password. That's when I heard her key in the front door. I quickly photographed the remaining documents, stuffed them back into their original positions, and slipped out of her room just as she was dropping her purse by the entrance. "Alex?" she called out, her voice carefully casual. "You home?" "I'm just getting some coffee," I called back from the kitchen, my voice betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through my system. "How was your morning?" She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I studied her face with new eyes. How had I missed the calculation behind her expressions, the way she was always assessing, always planning her next move? "Fine," she said, but she was looking around the apartment suspiciously, like she could sense that something had changed. "I'm gonna be working from home today." "Sounds good," I replied, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the one that said "Fueled by Dreams," which now felt bitterly ironic. "I'll probably be editing videos most of the day." I saw her flinch at the mention of videos, but she just nodded and headed toward her room. A few minutes later, I heard her door close and the distinctive sound of her dragging furniture, probably positioning her desk chair to block the door. Too little, too late, Rachel. I spent the rest of that Saturday crafting what would become the most viewed video in my TikTok series, a masterful blend of the supernatural story my audience had been following and the real-world horror of financial fraud. I structured it like a true crime revelation, building suspense as I discovered that the strange occurrences in our apartment might be connected to a more earthy evil. The video would go live Sunday night, perfectly timed for maximum Sunday Scaries engagement. By Monday morning, Rachel's life would be very different. But I wasn't done yet. The loan documents had given me an idea for the perfect final act that would ensure Rachel faced real consequences for what she'd done, not just social media embarrassment. Sunday night at 11:30 p.m., I hit publish on what would become the most devastating piece of social media content I'd ever created. The video opened exactly like my previous ones, me sitting in our dimly lit living room, supposedly discussing the ongoing supernatural phenomena in our apartment. But this time, I had a different energy. My followers, who had been invested in this mystery for 2 weeks, immediately sensed something big was coming. "I think I finally understand what's been haunting our apartment," I began, my voice carrying the perfect blend of relief and horror. "And guys, it's not what we thought." I walked my audience through a carefully crafted narrative, how the disturbances had led me to investigate other strange occurrences, how I discovered that someone had been using supernatural manipulation as a cover for something much more sinister, financial fraud. The genius of the approach was that I never directly accused Rachel. I simply presented the evidence as part of my ongoing investigation into the apartment's mysteries. I showed the bills under my name, the credit reports, the loan documents, all framed as discoveries I'd made while trying to understand the source of our supernatural problems. "The strangest part," I said, holding up the $8,000 loan document to the camera, "is that this person not only stole my identity, but they used the money to plan their escape to a luxury apartment, leaving me with thousands in fraudulent debt. It's like the ghost was never trying to scare me, it was trying to warn me." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first hour, the video had 100K views and climbing. The comment section exploded with a mixture of outrage, support, and armchair detective work from viewers who had become emotionally invested in my story. "OMG, I knew something was off about your roommate. This is actual fraud. You need to call the police. The audacity to steal $8K and plan to move to Belltown? I can't even... Your roommate is literally evil. Please tell me you're pressing charges." The way you revealed this was masterful, better than any true crime podcast. But the real satisfaction came Monday morning when I watched Rachel discover what had happened. I was in the kitchen, making my usual coffee and pretending to check emails, when I heard her bedroom door open. She'd been awake. I could hear her pacing and making phone calls until nearly 3 a.m., probably trying to do damage control with friends and family. She stumbled into our living room in her pajamas, her hair a mess, her face puffy from crying or lack of sleep, or both. She was clutching her hand like a lifeline, and I could see my TikTok video playing on her screen. 2.3 million views, she whispered, staring at the numbers. 2.3 million people have seen this? I looked up from my laptop with carefully crafted concern. Rachel, you look terrible. Are you okay? She turned to face me, and the expression on her face was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was pure devastation mixed with rage, like she was simultaneously drowning and on fire. You destroyed me, she said, her voice hollow. My job, my friends, my family, everyone has seen this video. Everyone knows what I did. I just shared my experience living in this apartment, I replied calmly. If people are drawing conclusions about you, maybe that says something about your actions, not my story. That's when she completely broke down. I'm getting fired today, she sobbed, collapsing onto our couch. My boss called me at 6 this morning. Someone from my entire company sent the video. They're saying I'm a liability, that they can't have someone facing fraud charges representing their brand. The professional consequences were swift and brutal. Rachel worked for a tech startup that prided itself on innovation and integrity. Having an employee exposed for systematic identity theft was exactly the kind of PR nightmare they couldn't afford. They'd placed her on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. But that wasn't all. My mom called, Rachel continued, her voice breaking. Someone from our hometown saw the video and recognized our apartment from my Instagram posts. She's so disappointed in me. She wants me to come home immediately. I watched her fall apart on the couch we'd shared so many comfortable evenings, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no impulse to comfort her. She had systematically destroyed my financial future while pretending to be my friend, and now she was facing the consequences of her choices. Rachel, you took out $8,000 loan under my name to fund an apartment upgrade while letting me believe we were partners in making this place work. You destroyed my credit score while making smoothie bowls and posting about self-care. What did you think was going to happen? I was going to pay you back. I swear, Alex, I had a plan. With what money? You maxed out the credit card you opened in my name. You're behind on all the bills you put under my information. You were planning to move to a luxury apartment and leave me with thousands in debt. The rain outside was getting heavier, classic Seattle weather that seemed to mirror the storm consuming Rachel's life. She sat there on our couch, scrolling through the endless comments on my video, watching strangers dissect her character and debate whether she deserved forgiveness or jail time. I have to move out, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't stay in Seattle. Everyone knows who I am now. Someone recognized me at the grocery store yesterday and started filming me. The viral nature of the story had taken on a life of its own. Local news stations had picked it up, true crime podcasters were analyzing my evidence, and social media detectives were tracking down every public record they could find related to Rachel Thompson, 24, marketing professional, turned notorious roommate fraud case. That's probably for the best, though you'll want to figure out how to resolve the financial mess you created before you go anywhere. Identity theft charges don't just disappear when you move to a different city. She spent the rest of that Monday packing her belongings while I worked on my laptop, occasionally answering interview requests from podcasters and journalists who wanted to hear more about the roommate horror story that broke the internet. The irony of finally getting media attention for my creative work, just not in the way I'd originally planned, wasn't lost on me. By evening, Rachel had loaded her car with everything she owned. She stood in our doorway one final time, looking small and defeated in the Seattle rain, holding a cardboard box of kitchen items that had once represented our shared domestic life. "Alex," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "I really am sorry. I never meant it to go this far." I looked at her standing there, drenched and pathetic, and realized that this was the moment I'd been building toward for weeks. Not just the viral exposure, not just the professional consequences, but this, watching someone who had betrayed me face the full weight of their choices. "Rachel, the only thing you're sorry about is getting caught." She didn't argue. She just turned and walked into the rain, leaving me alone in the apartment that had become the stage for the most elaborate revenge story I'd ever orchestrated. As I watched her car disappear down the street, taillights fading into the Seattle drizzle, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The plan had worked perfectly. Too perfectly, maybe. Rachel's life was genuinely ruined, her reputation destroyed, her career over, her family relationships damaged. But my credit score was still destroyed. The fraudulent accounts were still in my name. The real work of rebuilding my financial life was just beginning. Revenge, I was learning, was just the appetizer. Justice was the main course, and it required a lot more paperwork. 3 weeks after Rachel disappeared into the Seattle rain, I was sitting in the same living room where this whole saga began, but everything had changed. The apartment felt different without her presence, not haunted by supernatural forces, but by the ghost of misplaced trust. The fairy lights she'd hung still twinkled around the windows, but now they illuminated a space that belonged entirely to me. The succulent garden we'd started together had grown wild in her absence, spreading across the windowsill like nature reclaiming abandoned territory. My TikTok following had exploded to over 800K, turning me into an accidental influencer in the justice-served corner of social media. Brands were reaching out about sponsorships, podcasters wanted interviews, and Netflix had even contacted my business email about potentially developing my story into a limited series. The freelance advertising work that had been my bread and butter was suddenly secondary to this unexpected career pivot. But success felt complicated when it was built on someone else's destruction. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret exposing Rachel's fraud. The evidence was clear, the betrayal was real, and the consequences she faced were directly tied to choices she made. But watching someone's entire life implode in real time, even someone who had hurt me deeply, left me with questions about the nature of revenge and whether viral justice was really justice at all. The practical aftermath required months of work I hadn't anticipated. Disputing the fraudulent accounts meant hours on the phone with credit bureaus, filing police reports, working with lawyers to document the identity theft. Each cleared account felt like a small victory, but the process was exhausting in ways that social media revenge could never prepare you for. Rachel had left Seattle entirely, moving back to her parents' house in Spokane, according to mutual friends who occasionally updated me on her situation. She'd been formally charged with identity theft and fraud, the viral evidence making prosecution straightforward, but she'd plea bargains down to restitution and community service. No jail time, which honestly felt appropriate. Prison wouldn't fix my credit score or teach her genuine empathy. The most unexpected part of the whole experience was what I learned about myself. For months, I'd been so focused on the technical aspects of revenge, gathering evidence, building an audience, timing the revelation for maximum impact, that I hadn't really processed the emotional betrayal at the heart of the situation. Living alone in our shared space, I found myself grieving not just the friendship I'd lost, but the version of myself that had been naive enough to trust so completely. The Alex who had shared Netflix passwords and Sunday morning pancakes with Rachel felt like a different person, younger, more optimistic, less guarded. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The experience had taught me lessons about financial protection I'd never learned in college. I now check my credit report monthly, have fraud alerts on all my accounts, and maintain documentation systems that would make a forensic accountant proud. I'd become someone who understands the real-world mechanics of identity theft, not just the dramatic story potential. More importantly, I'd learned the difference between revenge and justice, between viral satisfaction and actual resolution. The TikTok videos had felt empowering in the moment, taking control of my narrative, exposing Rachel's deception, building an audience that supported my side of the story. But the real work of rebuilding trust, both in others and in myself, was happening in quieter moments, away from cameras and comment sections. Like my previous revenge experiences, the workplace bully, the catfishing ex, the manipulative sister, this experience had started with anger and evolved into something more complex. I was learning that the most satisfying victories weren't always the most public ones, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your capacity for trust. 6 months after Rachel moved out, I got a new roommate through a much more thorough screening process. Maya is a graduate student in environmental science, and we split utilities through a transparent shared spreadsheet that we both review monthly. She's never seen my viral TikToks, a relief, honestly, and our relationship is built on clear boundaries and honest communication, rather than the false intimacy that had made Rachel's betrayal so devastating. The apartment feels like home again, but a different kind of home. One where trust is earned gradually rather than assumed immediately, where financial boundaries are clear from the beginning, where friendship develops alongside respect for individual autonomy. I still make content about my revenge experiences, but the tone has evolved. The stories are less about devastating karma and more about the complex process of recovering from betrayal, building better boundaries, and learning when forgiveness serves your own healing rather than someone else's absolution. Because here's what I've realized. Revenge gave me back my sense of agency when I felt powerless, but it was forgiveness, not of Rachel, but of my own naivete, that gave me back my ability to trust. Not blindly, the way I had before, but consciously, with full awareness of the risks and safeguards in place. The real victory wasn't destroying Rachel's life through viral exposure. It was rebuilding my own life with better systems, clearer boundaries, and a more nuanced understanding of how trust functions in adult relationships. But I'd be lying if I said the viral satisfaction wasn't deeply gratifying in the moment. Sometimes you need to see justice served publicly before you can do the private work of moving forward. Have you ever been betrayed by a roommate? Someone you trusted with your home, your space, your daily life who turned out to be deceiving you in ways you never imagined? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, the good, the bad, and the completely unbelievable. Because if this experience taught me anything, it's that we're all just trying to figure out how to trust each other without losing ourselves in the process. If there's one thing this whole roommate nightmare taught me, it's that protecting yourself financially isn't paranoia. It's basic adulting that nobody teaches you in college. Let me share the practical lessons I learned the hard way so you don't have to go through your own viral revenge story to figure this stuff out. First, and I cannot stress this enough, check your credit report every single month. I use Credit Karma because it's free and sends notifications when anything changes. But there are other services that work just as well. Don't wait for your annual free report. By then, damage like mine can already be extensive. Set a calendar reminder for the same day each month. Make it as routine as paying your phone bill. When you're living with roommates, never, ever let someone else handle utility setups without being present for the phone calls. I learned this lesson at the cost of a 150-point credit score drop, but you can learn it from my mistake. Insist on being on the phone when accounts are opened. Verify that your information is being used correctly, and keep copies of all utility agreements. It feels awkward to be that suspicious of someone you're sharing a home with, but it's much less awkward than discovering they've destroyed your financial future. Document everything. I mean, everything. Take photos of lease agreements, utility bills, any financial arrangements you make with roommates. Keep a shared spreadsheet of expenses with timestamps and receipts. It sounds excessive until you need proof of who paid what and when. The evidence I gathered about Rachel's fraud was so comprehensive that the legal case was straightforward. Prosecutors love clear documentation. If you're going to use social media for justice, and I'm not necessarily recommending this, but if you choose this path, understand that viral content has consequences you can't control. My TikTok exposure of Rachel achieved the goal of holding her accountable, but it also meant months of dealing with journalists, internet detectives, and people who wanted to insert themselves into our story. Think carefully about whether you want that level of public attention before you hit publish. Learn the difference between revenge and resolution. The viral satisfaction of exposing Rachel felt incredible in the moment, but it didn't automatically fix my credit score or teach me how to prevent future financial fraud. The real work, disputing accounts, filing police reports, rebuilding trust, happened offline and took much longer than creating content. Plan for the practical aftermath, not just the emotional satisfaction. Most importantly, forgiveness isn't about absolving someone else's behavior. It's about freeing yourself from carrying their choices. I didn't forgive Rachel because she deserved it. I forgave the situation because holding on to that level of anger was exhausting and limiting my ability to build better relationships. Forgiveness was the final step in taking back my power, not giving up my right to justice. The roommate screening process I use now is thorough to the point of probably seeming excessive, but it works. I ask for references from previous roommates, run credit checks, verify employment, and have clear written agreements about financial responsibilities. I also maintain separate accounts for all shared expenses and require transparent monthly reviews of spending. It's not romantic, but neither is identity theft. If you're in a creative field like I am, use these experiences as fuel for your work, but don't let them define your entire creative output. The attention from my revenge story opened doors I never expected, but I've made sure to diversify my content and build skills beyond just telling stories about people who wronged me. Revenge content has a shelf life. Genuine talent and consistent work ethic don't. Finally, trust your instincts about people, but verify their claims. Rachel had seemed like the perfect roommate because I was looking for signs of compatibility rather than signs of integrity. Now I pay attention to how people handle money in small situations. Do they Venmo you back promptly when you split a dinner check? Do they contribute fairly to shared household supplies? Do they follow through on financial commitments without reminders? These small behaviors predict larger financial ethics. The systems I've built around financial protection feel like armor now, not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm prepared. I can trust people more freely because I'm not depending on their integrity alone to protect my financial security. Good systems make good relationships possible. And here's the thing about revenge stories like mine. They're entertaining, they're satisfying, they feel like justice being served. But the most important part isn't the dramatic exposure or the viral moment or even the consequences for the person who wronged you. The most important part is what you learn about protecting yourself, setting better boundaries, and building resilience for whatever comes next. Trust, but verify. Document, but don't obsess. Seek justice, but don't sacrifice your own healing for someone else's punishment. And remember that the best revenge is often just living well with better systems in place. Your financial security and peace of mind are worth more than any viral moment, no matter how satisfying it might feel in the heat of betrayal.